Hi everyone, my name's Dr. Rebekah Vince, or just Rebekah, and I'm going to speak to you about French studies at Mural, which can be combined with other degree combinations. So today we're going to be talking about Afropean Identities, which features in a couple of modules that we teach here at Queen Mary. It's introduced in the first year module Culture and Language, in the Race, Class and Religion lecture in Block 3, and it's a second or final year module. And it also ties into another module which is being developed called Race and Racism in Europe. So we're going to watch a short clip about this book, Afropean. Don't know if any of you have heard of it. Afropean Notes from Black Europe by Johnny Pitts. And we're going to answer the question, why did Johnny Pitts write the book, Afropean, in this clip? So why did Johnny Pitts write the book, Afropean?
I always think of this quote by Frantz Fanon, who said that Europe had woven him out of 1,000 details, anecdotes and stories, his story. I guess that's what I wanted to do with Afropean, is sort of weave the Black experience back in to the sort of various national identities of Europe. I wanted to create a book that basically showed that Black people exist in Europe.
Did any of you catch why Johnny Pitts wrote Afropean, or should we watch it again? Should we watch that clip again?
I always think of this quote by Frantz Fanon, who said that Europe had woven him out of 1,000 details, anecdotes and stories, his story. I guess that's what I wanted to do with Afropean, is sort of weave the Black experience back in to the sort of various national identities of Europe. I wanted to create a book that basically showed that Black people exist in Europe.
Any thoughts from here or online otherwise? Any thoughts? Okay, let's look at that together then. So he said, I wanted to weave the Black experience back into the various national identities of Europe. I wanted to create a book that basically showed that Black people exist in Europe. So it's about the Black experience and about these Afro-European, African-European identities. And interestingly, he quotes a anti-colonial writer called Frantz Fanon, who was from Martinique. He says, I always think of this quote by Frantz Fanon, who said that Europe had woven him out of 1,000 details, anecdotes, and stories. Interestingly, he kind of misquotes Frantz Fanon and translates Le Blanc, the white or the white man, as Europe. So I want to think about that and putting into Europe the Black experience so that Europe isn't synonymous with white. And Peau Noir Masque Blanc, which came out in 1952, has been translated several times into English, and this is the most recent Black Skin, White Masks, with an introduction by post-colonial writer Paul Gilroy. So we're going to watch another clip, and I want you to think about this question and maybe have the courage to put up your hand afterwards and answer it. But yeah, just think about this question. What connects Black communities in Europe, according to Johnny Pitts, in the next clip that we're going to watch? And he also quotes historian Michelle Wright, the past is not behind us, it's all around us in changed form. And that relates to the post-colonial experience. So what connects Black communities in Europe, according to Johnny Pitts?
I think that, it's important that there is some solidarity amongst the Black community in Europe when we're seeing this rise in nationalism. The African-American experience has been woven into the mythology of America at large, everybody knows who Martin Luther King is, Whereas I noticed that the Afro-European experience, there's never been a civil rights movement in Europe. And so what you find is that the Afro-European experience isn't as solid or as sure of itself. And so for me, I think what joins Afropeans together is a history of colonialism. And in most of the places that I visited, it was Black communities dealing with the injustices that are still prevalent from the days of colonialism. That, a scholar, Michelle Wright, once said, the past is not behind us, it's all around us in changed form. And so there are all these hierarchies embedded in Europe that I feel like the Black communities are kind of grappling with. And I think that's the one thing that really connected the Black experience in Europe.
Does anybody get from that what connects Black communities in Europe, according to Johnny Pitts? Or anyone in there? Okay, we'll just watch that clip again. And if you think about that question, what connects Black communities in Europe, according to Johnny Pitts?
I think that, it's important that there is some solidarity amongst the Black community in Europe when we see this rise in nationalism. The African American experience has been woven into the mythology of America at large, everybody knows who Martin Luther King is, Whereas I noticed that the Afro-European experience, there's never been a civil rights movement in Europe. And so what you find is that the Afro-European experience isn't as solid or as sure of itself. And so for me, I think what joins Afropeans together is a history of colonialism. And in most of the places that I visited, it was Black communities dealing with the injustices that are still prevalent from the days of colonialism. That, a scholar, Michelle Wright, once said, the past is not behind us, it's all around us in changed form. And so there are all these hierarchies embedded in Europe that I feel like the Black communities are kind of grappling with. And I think that's the one thing that really connected the Black experience in Europe.
Any thoughts on that? What connects Black communities in Europe? Feel free to raise your hand. Yeah. A mic is coming your way.
So he talked about the history of colonialism and the rise of nationalism within Europe, which connects them all together because they haven't really had that movement for themselves in Europe, unlike in America.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for that response. So there's this kind of solidarity around the colonial experience, but also rising nationalism, which is kind of a neo-colonial phenomenon as well. Thank you so much for that response. So we're going to hone in now to Gaël Faye. You might have heard of Stromae. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Gaël Faye. So he was born in Rwanda, in Bujumbura, to a Rwandan mother and a French father. At age 13, he was forced into exile in France during the Burundian Civil War. He's now based in Kigali, but he often travels to Paris. I'd really recommend this short podcast on Gaël Faye and the new generation of Afropean artists, which also includes Stromae, who you might be familiar with already. So Gaël Faye kind of rose to fame really through this book, which actually started as a music video, as a song, Petit Pays. Then it's since been adapted into a film. And it's also been translated into English. So yeah, I'd really recommend engaging with that text. He more recently released a single called Respire, Breathe, Respire. And that's what we're going to be looking at next. And it was kind of like a really timely music video in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, I Can't Breathe, which is also something that Frantz Fanon, who we looked at earlier, wrote about in his book, Black Skin, White Masks. And also in the context of COVID, this music video is particularly timely. So I'd really recommend watching that YouTube video in your own time and listening out for some of the lyrics. You'll have noticed some of the striking images of like the box and the masks, feeding into the idea of claustrophobia, of not being able to breathe. So here we're going to look at some cognates, words that are similar in English. So I'll just give you a few moments just to read as much as you can from this text, or just to identify any words that look similar to words in English, And when you do, feel free to raise your hand. Equally online in the chat, you can put your responses, any words that look similar to words in English. Feel free to raise your hand. Does anybody want to offer any words that look similar in English? I'll give an example. So you've got fatigué here, which looks like the English word fatigue, and it's in the past, so it's tired, fatigué. Any other words that look similar to words in English? Yeah, masks, yeah. And that's a key word as well in the whole black skin, white masks, but also mask wearing, as you're doing now during COVID. Yeah, definitely. So we've got tired, masks, any other? Sorry? Yes, yes, exactly. So what do people think that might mean? Reflections that look similar to the reflection. Glass, so it looks a bit like glass, and like in the olden days we would say like look in a glass would be like look in a mirror, so that would be mirror. And face à face, face to face. So here are the cognates underlined in blue. And then I've also highlighted the rhymes, midi, mi, bonheur, fleur. Midday, put on, in the past tense, happiness, flowers. So following on from that, if you can identify the rhymes, and maybe if you know some French, give a translation for those rhymes. Feel free again to raise your hand. So we've got étroite and boîte. Does anybody know what those words mean? So étroite means narrow, and here we've got cognate again, routine, and then boîte means boxes, so it's that idea of being boxed in that we looked at in the visuals as well. And then cramer and respirer, the key word here, to breathe. And again, we've got some cognates, quitter, to quit or to leave, one's role, and again, cases, but again, it kind of means the idea of being boxed in, having to fill in a box. And again, respirer, to breathe. So I've given you some words here, and this is kind of more of a translation exercise. So you might be familiar with avoir and être, two very key verbs, both irregular in French, to have and to be. Ta is a colloquial way of saying tu as, you have, and here we have a negative, rien n'est, nothing is. So I'll give you a few moments just to come up with your own translation. Feel free to be creative, and if you want to, you can suggest your translation. That would be great, and also online if. Okay, does anybody want to translate a line or even the whole stanza? Yeah, please. In the green hat, yeah.
Okay, right. So first line, I think it's, you have
short breaths, breathe, right? Second line, when nothing is easy. Third line, I struggled on this one, but I think it's even if you lose yourself. And then the last line is, and if everything gets worse, and then hope.
Brilliant. Yeah. So you notice that there's this breathe, 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 and then there's kind of turn at the end, hope. Yeah, really, really great how you translated, particularly the second. The third line, I guess, could be translated as lose yourself, or kind of, it's also the idea of getting lost or feeling lost. So you could have a broader translation of that, even if you feel lost. But lose yourself also works really well. The first line could also be stretched a bit. So you could say you're short of breath. In the French, it's literally you have the short breath, but you could say you're short of breath when nothing is easy, even if you lose yourself, really like that. And if everything gets worse, worsens would be like a more formal way of saying it, but that wouldn't work in this context. Hope. So yeah, to end on that note of hope, I hope that this is an interesting presentation for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions about French at Queen Mary. This presentation was designed from ab initio, from like beginner to more advanced. So if you found it too easy, don't worry, you won't be put in situations where you'll find that at every level you'll be stretched and encouraged and supported in your French language learning. And there's this key element of culture, literature, and film from the first year module, culture and language, through to the optional modules that you'll be able to take throughout your degree.